Hello and welcome to the Maxi-Geek Show. This is episode number 46 and today is Friday, January 27th. Hello tabs. This week was quite a loaded one with 3 digital events that happened. Plenty of games were announced for during the week. Of course, the major news was the Xbox Developer Direct, or as the internet is calling it, the Xbox Direct. Before we get into that news though, we'll go through the remaining news, starting off with the first digital event of the week, and that is all around SteamWorld. So SteamWorld hosted their digital event. They call it the SteamWorld Telegraph. And this was to announce the next game in the SteamWorld series. What was interesting about this is that they already announced the next game in the SteamWorld series over a year ago, SteamWorld Headhunter. We don't know if that game's still in development or if they've moved on to this one, or there's no information on that one. Okay, the SteamWorld Telegraph event revealed SteamWorld Build, which is a combination SimCity-esque strategy game above ground, but then below ground it is a full-on mining, excavating type game. So a lot of this is about strategy. It's about choosing what to build and where to build it. If you build one item, build a building to have more bots to do other jobs, you may end up with less resources to repair something. But you also need to manage the underground portion of it. Unfortunately, the reveal trailer doesn't really show a heck of a lot. Let me jump in past this opening stuff. So it takes place in this 3D world, which is the first time that the SteamWorld series will have been released in 3D. Headhunter was announced to be a 3D game, but again, we don't know what's going on with that one. The big thing with this, though, is obviously the below ground. So the below ground is going to be very familiar to anyone who's ever played SteamWorld Dig or Dig 2. There are square blocks full of gold and rubies and scrap metal and all sorts of bits and pieces. The big thing with this, though, is that the timeline for the story that's being shown is the final moments, the final months or whatever you want to call it, of SteamWorld Dig 2. So while that is happening and they're trying to build the rocket to escape the planet, that is the same goal here, but in order to make sure they're able to do so, they go, try and gather all the resources they can to build a rocket and escape, which is why you're building it down, which is why you're excavating, going down below the surface. What is interesting, where is that screen? There it is the game is being built for PC and all consoles. So it's PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One and Series X and S, and Switch. It'll be launching at the end of the year. Now, every single aspect of the game has been designed to work with a controller. Mouse and keyboard, that's fine. It's a mouse and keyboard. You could do 17 million things and it wouldn't impact it. But every single gameplay element they've added to the title has gone through basically an iterative process that said, cool, we want to add this feature. And then whoever proposed it had to provide a controller-based way of using it. So there isn't just, they haven't just thrown everything in on a PC build and now adapting it to the controller. They've gone the other way, whereas every single gameplay edition had to have a controller option laid out for it. So in the footage they show during the actual event, they do show the PlayStation build. You can tell that because it's got the square and the triangle and all that on the buttons. But beyond that, there's no limitation, there's no difference between the PC build and the console build. One would assume you could use a controller on the PC build if you're so inclined, but you don't need to. The big thing for me is I played through the demo that they did release on PC. The big thing is that if you jump into the below ground and you manage your miners, your excavators, your machinery downstairs, everything on the surface is still happening. So the bots are still getting timber, they're still processing, building materials, they're doing everything they still do. The train, as you can see, there's a train on the tracks there. The train comes through every 8 minutes or so at real world time, and you have to, when that comes in, you can go buy additional perks and upgrades to help you out. So if you're spending time below ground, you may miss these things. If you're spending time above ground, though, the miners will still be digging things out below ground that you've told them to work on. And if you're not paying attention, they could dig too much without you having put in support strats. And if you don't do that, then it can actually cause the mine to collapse. So it's very interesting dynamic, because the game doesn't pause when you're in the mine, the overworld doesn't stand still, and vice versa. So you really have to balance all aspects at once. We did learn that the developer of this isn't Image and Form. So it is another studio owned by Thunderfall Games called The Station. So this is the sixth, technically it's the seventh SteamWorld game announced. It's the sixth one that will be released. So the first 5 were all done by Image and Form. And they did the tower defense on the DSi, then Dig, Quest, and Dig 2 for 3DS. Obviously, Dig 2 came to everything, and we sort of went through all those bits and pieces going that way. So this is the first time that it is no longer being developed by Image and Form. They're still overseeing it, of course, because they're the creators of the franchise. And Image and Form came together with Zoink to make Thunderfall games. So they're still overseeing and controlling everything, but they're not doing the day-to-day development. But yeah, so the station, they were picked up by Thunderfall in 2020, and the developers there have worked on Little Big Planet, God of War series, Dark Souls, really touched on a whole mess of genres. So it's kind of interesting that this is the developer leading the charge with SteamWorld Build. Thank you, Tabs, for the update on the music. One thing that was interesting that came from the event is that they confirmed there are 4 SteamWorld games in development. This is one of them. If we make the assumption that Headhunter is still in active development, that would be 2. That would be the second one, which means there are 2 games as yet unannounced. Given that we've had a tower defense game, we've had platforming games in the Dig series, we had a turn-based shooter in Heist, then we had a card-based RPG in Quest, and now obviously a city builder. There's no telling what the other 2 games might be. They could be, a SteamWorld Mario Kart clone, right? Or it could be a SteamWorld Dark Souls. We honestly have no idea. We just have to wait and see. The SteamWorld Telegraph series will actually become, a recurring thing. They're going to keep it going, forward. Their frequency, we don't know, but there will be more SteamWorld news being released throughout the year, so do look forward to that. Something that is a little sooner, because it happened today, is that Goldeneye finally released for the Switch. So we knew this was coming. This was announced in September during the Nintendo Direct, that amongst Mario Party and Pokemon Stadium, that Goldeneye would finally get a release on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack service. The news that came out afterwards was that the game would also be coming to Xbox platforms, and is included in Game Pass. Now, what is quite interesting with this is they are 2 different versions of the game. The one on the Switch is an emulated version of the Nintendo 64 release. The team have done a little tweak to the NSO app to account for the proper widescreen support for it. The game itself on the Nintendo 64 actually has widescreen support, but that widescreen support was somewhat artificial. It basically just cropped the top and bottom of the image to give you a widescreen effect. This is now a proper widescreen thing, so they've done a little tweaking there. The Xbox version of the game is an emulated version of the game, but it's an emulated version of an enhanced port of the game. So it's a very tricky scenario to try and explain. The problem is because they didn't rebuild the game up on the new platforms. They're emulating an older build of the game. The multiplayer here is all local only for Xbox, because they're emulating what's already there. Switch is emulating it, but the Nintendo Switch Online, the Nintendo 64 app as part of the service has built in already online multiplayer for all the games. So if a game has multiplayer, you can do it online via the Switch. So Goldeneye on Switch has multiplayer online support, whereas the Xbox version is just purely local. There was, people were freaking out, last night and this morning about, Switch version not having an item in there, not having some sound effects in there. That has been proven to be incorrect. It's all fully there. Again, this is the Nintendo 64 game, so even though that does look like Pierce Brosnan, it is a very flat version of Pierce Brosnan's face. That bloody trapdoor in the train is there, so it's all there. There's Sean Bean, and there's the facility where they're shooting. As I say, it is on Xbox as well. The Xbox does support more modern control inputs, because the Xbox controller is very different to the Nintendo 64 controller, but it's available there if you want to give it a go. If you don't have a Switch, you can play it on the Xbox. If you have both and you have the expansion pack for Switch Online, I would say just get it on Switch. That would be the best way to... Yeah, so the weird thing with the Goldeneye thing for Xbox is on the official trailers they've released for it, it is marked as Rare Replay, which is kind of honestly, it's a stupid thing that they've done, because what they've done is they've now put out there that this game is part of Rare Replay. Rare Replay, if you're not aware, was a disc that they released like 8 years ago now, that had a bunch of their classic games. Had Perfect Dark on there from the 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. It had Snake, Rattle and Roll and Pro Racer AM. It had a bunch of NES games. Had a lot of the sort of really big names. The more popular titles from Rare over 25, 30 years. And that was phenomenal. So when they released that on disc, they said, here's everything, go for it. They also then released digitally as well, so you could buy it as a digital release. The content on them was identical, right? If you bought the disc and you bought the digital version, you're duplicating your purchase. Because of the way that the licensing deal's been done with Nintendo, with Danyak, who's the Bond IP owner, and all the sort of various scripts that had to come together for this, it's not available to people who own the disc-based version of Rare Replay. Even though it's branded as a Rare Replay title, it's only available to those who have the digital version. So if you have Rare Replay on a disc and you play it quite frequently, you do not get this as part of that service, even though they market it as included in Rare Replay. It is obviously in Xbox Game Pass, so if you do have Game Pass, you can play it as via the subscription. You don't even need Rare Replay for that. It is a convoluted method that they've gone about releasing this game on Xbox. It should have just been a straight Game Pass release, nothing else. You buy it if you want for $10 and be done with it. But that's not the way they did it, so it's just confusing a lot of people. But it had to be a monkey paw somewhere with this sort of thing, and I'm glad it was just it's confusion rather than an inferior port or something. So that's the way it is. Moving away from good news with Goldeneye, we move into the bad news with Marvel's Avengers, and that is that the game is shutting down. So Marvel's Avengers, if you're not aware, made headlines when it was announced because it included MCU visual styles of all the characters, but it was essentially like the B-grade version of them. So the moment they revealed it and they said, this is Captain America, and everyone went, it looks like you drew Chris Evans, but a bad Chris Evans. It instantly had an uphill climb to make. And then they said it's a live service game like Destiny, and people went, okay. So they kept making these statements about what the game was, and it wasn't really getting anyone's attention. Crystal Dynamics, who are the folks that developed this, they're the folks behind Tomb Raider. They're working on Perfect Dark Reboot, the Perfect Dark Reboot game for Microsoft alongside the Initiative, and they're developing a new Tomb Raider game for Amazon. Amazon Games are publishing that. They're the folks that were working on this. Now, Crystal Dynamics, their main studio, were the ones leading development initially, but then Crystal North were the ones that picked up the development once it released. So they've been working on this. This game released in September of 2020. Right, it was sort of, the big game at the time. It launched with the 6 heroes, so Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And then the character that brought you into everything was Miss Marvel. Now, this is obviously long before the Miss Marvel TV show happened, so, this was sort of a lot of people's first introduction to that character. Since the release of that, they added Hawkeye. So Hawkeye Clint Barton was in the game already, but they added the, Kate Bishop Hawkeye. They added Spider-Man. If you're a PlayStation owner, you got that exclusive character, which again is bullshit. They added Black Panther. And then just in December last year, they added the Winter Soldier. So they added a heck of a lot of content to this game. New story missions, like the Black Panther thing. They added Wakanda, a whole new, locations to explore and everything. What is happening is on March 31st, the update 2.8 will be released. This is the final content update for the game. So this, they're not going to add new, cosmetics or anything like that. But this is the last, adjustment update for it. I suspect there might be a final, like a 2.8.1, if they, inadvertently break something major. But this is the last planned major update for the title. As of then, all the cosmetics in the game that you would have to, play to unlock over months and months, they'll all be made available for everyone. And then on September 30th, there will be no more support for the game. So this is the important thing. The support is ending on September 30th. So just over 3 years between when the game first launched and when they're stopping development of anything for it. On October 1st, the next day, the game will still be fully playable. You can still buy the game on disc and do all that sort of stuff. It'll download all the updates, and you'll get all the characters, all the maps, all the missions, all the challenges, everything. But it will no longer be supported. If on October 1st multiplayer breaks because something happened with servers, it's too bad, so sad. Because the final update in March should address all the balancing and final issues, there shouldn't be any issues, going past then. But the game will remain playable. So you can play it solo, you can team up with friends online as long as you pay, for your platform access if you require it. Nothing there is changing. You can still enjoy the game. You can still run around with your mates. They just won't support it. So if a year from, let's say, next July, they find a horrible bug that if you do 7 things in a row with one character in one portion of the map, it bricks the game. That's it. They don't care. They won't be working on it. They're moving on to other things. So that's that. One of the things, though, is as of March 31st, you will no longer be able to buy credits for the game. Credits were, their digital currency you could spend real-world money on for. All credits balances will be converted on the 31st. They did release this table. So, if you have, 1,000 credits, you'll get 333,333 units, 33,333 fragments, upgrade modules, polygons, DNA keys. The way all this works is they're doing it. These are the things you would use to unlock items and unlock, different abilities and such. These will, be done that way. So, if you do have credits, you do get stuff for them. And if you do have more than 25,000 credits, they're just going to max out all the things. So if the cap for DNA keys is 150, and you have 25,000 credits, you'll get 150 DNA keys. I don't know what the cap is for DNA keys, but that's sort of what it is. It is interesting that, this is happening, not because it's, sad news. Games do come to end of life unless you're Ubisoft and you keep milking them. But it's sort of interesting that, this game kept going on as long as it did. I posted a lot of stories about it. When they added Hawkeye, they added a whole story about Old Man Hulk. So if you've seen Avengers Endgame, where Bruce Banner and the Hulk, become Smart Hulk, Old Man Hulk is essentially at the end of the world, because of something. He's sort of the only one around because of his gamma radiation stuff. So they added him in there, and they did that sort of storyline for him. That's sort of separate from the main game, but this wasn't a 1 hour mission. This was 10-12 hours of content, and they did that for every character. Obviously PlayStation fans got more with Spider-Man. That's the other thing too, is when they said this, somebody said, hey, will Spider-Man now come to Xbox and PC? And the answer is no. They decided that wasn't going to be the case because they like money too much from Sony, I suppose. But yeah, it is sad that it's ending, but again, it's more surprising that it kept hanging on as long as it did, given how disinterested a lot of people seemed with it. It did have its fans, I will give it that, and the developers, they kept adding enough to it, but yeah, just surprised me it stuck around as long as it had. Speaking of sticking around, we're back again with a new WWE entry, and John Cena is once again front and center. Now, I'm not going to make any jokes about the whole you can't see him thing. That is stupid, and anyone who supports that is an idiot. The reason why WWE 2K23 is interesting is it's not because 2K doing 3 different versions of the game like they always do. It's not the fact that John Cena's on the box art in all 3 versions. It's that they're using his career as a challenge mode. So John Cena's been doing WWE for 20 years now. So he started, back in the early 2000s. In that time, he lost to The Rock, he lost to Dave Bautista, he lost to, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So he hasn't had a great run over the years. He lost more than he won early on. The 2K Showdown mode basically puts you in control of John Cena, recreating the fights from the various, big spectacle, events that took place in his career. So, when he lost to Dave Bautista early on, you get to recreate that fight, and, the challenge is, can you beat Dave Bautista? Can you change the course of history? That's obviously not the whole thing, that's not the whole game, but that's one of the big things for this, is that you get a chance to rewrite, history for John Cena. The game will, of course, feature, the standard, game modes. So the My Career, the My GM is in there with more GMs to play with. So yeah, My Faction, which now has multiplayer online. Sorry, I didn't have online previously, but that's there now. My Rise is the career mode where you create your own wrestler and you go through the whole, early days of wrestling, joining up in a league and all that sort of stuff. The Creation Suite is where you can make rings, you can make characters, you can do all the bits and pieces. The game, as I said, is coming in 3 flavors. There's the standard edition, which is just the game. On consoles, there is the cross-gen edition, which is literally what it says. It's the same price as the next-gen only edition, but it gets you the game on both last-gen and current-gen. The deluxe comes with a bunch of DLC, and the Icon is the big version. That's $180 for it. It comes with everything you get previously, plus a whole bunch of, extra characters and things like that. And that's the one that has the fancy art. But, like WWE 2K22, they're using all the characters again, going through all the bits and pieces to sort of highlight the looks of everyone. The team haven't rested. They've refined their visual engine that they, rebuilt after the, abysmal 2K20. So 2K22 had, a whole new look, a whole new physics engine and everything. They've refined that even further. We did get a small trailer. I say trailer, it's not really a trailer. During a WWE event, like 2 days after they announced the game. And in that, there's a bit of footage, but it's more John Cena looking at the camera talking than it is anything else. It's not exactly a real gameplay trailer. The interesting thing is that this game is set to release in 2 months. So the game is dated to release on March 17 for all platforms. So all platforms being PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. If you get the deluxe or the icon, you get 3 days early access, so you'll get that on the 14th. If you're a WWE fan, this is probably exciting news for you. If you're wondering how Visual Concepts, the studio who make this, can do NBA 2K in September and WWE in March every year now, that is because they have 9 studios around the world. So they are a very, very big group. So they're very, very, very busy folks. Moving on into the world of Switch, a game was announced during the week that made sense initially for it to come to Switch, and then they didn't announce it, but they finally have, and that is that Trek to Yomi is finally trekking onto Switch. So Trek to Yomi is a 2D samurai game that makes it look... It sort of takes the inspiration from the Akira Kurosawa films, the samurai films that he made. It isn't a faithful adaptation of any particular film he made, just that sort of visual style. Interestingly, this game will be on Switch on January 30th. Now, what is really cool about this is because it's such a stylized look, what you're seeing now is the Switch trailer, but it looks identical to the PC and PS5 builds that I played last year. So yeah, it's a 2D side scroller. Combat is very it's not fluid so much, but it's you have to pay attention. A couple of hits from a sword and you can die, right? But the whole thing is that your character Hiroki, when he heads out of his village to help another village that's under attack by bandits, that turns out to have been a trick, and they lured him out so they could raid his village and cause chaos. We did review the game last year. It isn't a especially long game. It's about 5 to 6 hours depending on how much exploration you do. There's not a lot of it, but you can do some. As I said, just visually, it looks exactly like stills from films. Even when I previewed the game, I screenshotted consistently because the game just looks so visually stunning. It is available for pre-order on the eShop now, so it is set to release on January 30th. 30th, 31st, it's a Nintendo release, so it can split the date. It is priced at $30, so it is a little expensive for the length of time if you're somebody who's worried about that. But I do think it is a fantastic release nonetheless, and you should definitely check it out if you're interested. If you are an Xbox fan though, the game is available there and it is included inside of Game Pass. And with that, Game Pass is also getting a bunch of new titles starting yesterday. So as happens all the time, Xbox and PlayStation announce multiple times games that are being added to their services. Xbox, they did a little differently. So Hi-Fi Rush, that's there. We'll come back to that. Goldeneye, that's now out. RoboQuest is available now on PC through Game Pass. It is in Game Preview, which is their version of Early Access. It is now getting a console version of that release. That does look very interesting if you're someone who's into sort of not Gundam sort of mech, but more like Ratchet and Clank mech. Something like that. That's interesting there. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition is coming out next week for Xbox and Cloud. I can never pronounce this. It's Illuminati, but you say it all together. That is coming to Game Preview for both console and PC next week. So again, that's an early access release. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R is being added on the 31st. That is for cloud, console, and PC. Darkest Dungeon is coming on February 2nd for all things, so cloud, console, and PC. And Grid Legends is already available inside of Game Pass for both PC and Xbox, but it's getting a cloud version on February 2nd. So you'll be able to play Grid Legends anywhere you go. A few days later, on the 7th, Hot Wheels Unleashed is coming to all platforms inside of Game Pass. It is the same that is available now. It's just going to be, as part of the membership. Unfortunately, as with always, when they do add a bunch of titles, they take titles away. This is a very small list. Normally we get, 8, 9, 10 titles being taken away. This time it's only 4. But those titles are coming off at the end of January, so you've only got a few days left for them. That is Donut County, Taiko no Tatsujin, The Drum Master, Telling Lies, and Worms WMD. So yeah, it's a good sort of balance of racing games, action games, a couple of game preview titles, and things like that. So it's interesting that they did this after the Xbox Direct happened. They announced this randomly through an Xbox Wire post. I would have thought they could have thrown it in as sort of a by the by sort of thing. Here's stuff to look forward to outside of what we just showed, but that's what they didn't do. The value for Game Pass obviously keeps it fluctuates depending on the games that are added and removed. If you've not played Hot Wheels Unleashed and you want Hot Wheels Unleashed and you have Game Pass, this is probably great news for you. That game's been out for a year and 4 months now. So there's a fair chance if you've already wanted to play, you have. So it may not add value to you, but for some people, that's exactly what they want. So it is good to see that they are sticking with it. What we're going to do now is we're going to pivot into the Xbox Developer Direct. And we're going to just sort of speed through what they showed off, because there's a fair chance you've already watched it. If you haven't, I'll make sure to put all these stories in the show notes so you can check it out later. But we'll sort of just cover off the highlights of each of the presentations, and then we'll move on. Obviously, we're going to kick off with the same game that they did, and that is Minecraft Legends getting its release date. So Minecraft Legends is the tactical spin-off, it's the strategic spin-off of the Minecraft games. It is being developed by Blackbird Interactive. They're the folks behind the Homeworld 3 game that's coming out. They also did a Homeworld remaster, a number of years ago. And they also did the Crossfire Legion RTS for Smilegate as part of the Crossfire universe. So they know the sort of strategy, genre quite well. Minecraft Legends, though, is a multi-platform game. It's Minecraft, so it's coming to everything. It will offer cross-play, so if you have mates on PlayStation that have it and you have it on Switch or Xbox or PC, you can all play together still. The big sort of main thing with this story-wise is that you have to build up resources to stop the piglin invasion of the world. You can do it solo, you can have friends join you, you can all run around and try and do it. During this event, they put the spotlight on the PvP that the game offers. This isn't anything new. We've seen the PvP before, but they deep dived into it. I shouldn't say we saw it before, but they've announced it previously, but they deep dived into it this time. The big thing with the PvP is that it is 2 teams of 4 players. So it's 8 players in total. Every time you start a new map, the world is randomly generated. So you're not playing the same. You're not picking map A or map B or map C. You're picking start and it generates the world for you. As it's Minecraft, you don't just have a base, you have to build the base. You have to go get resources. You can have somebody in your team run out and just collect resources so you can build a base, right? You might send another player out to collect mobs so you have, creatures and animals, on your side to help defend your base. And you might maybe send someone out as a scout so they can actually run around, try and learn where the enemy is. So when you are ready to take the fight to them, you don't just wander around randomly. So there's a whole lot of sort of, team coordination required to keep that going. But the whole thing with Minecraft Legends is, of course, the piglin invasion. That does not go away in this mode. So if you're playing PvP, you have yourself and your 3 mates and you're facing off against another team. While you're building up your base, scouting over the world around you, the piglins can still come and raid you. They can still come and cause devastation. Right? They can also do it to the opposing team. So it's not as if they're going to target your team every time. It's random. Whichever one they find first will be the one they go after. The reason why this is interesting is because while the piglins are invading, you can still attack. So if you've built up a decent base, you've got enough traps and walls to keep people out, you can actually build, take your mobs and go and raid the other base. You can see here, this is the player character, fighting against a bunch of piglins. The structures here are very rudimentary. There's not a lot going on. But yeah, so you're not restricted to, just watching the piglins and seeing how the opposing team does against them. You can actually jump in and either help them out and fight the piglins, or you can help the piglins out and fight them. But if you destroy that team, the piglins will turn on you. If you destroy the other team, though, you technically win, so it's not a real issue there. But yeah, obviously the game is dated for April 18th. We got that for Xbox during the show, Xbox and PC. They confirmed it for Xbox One, Xbox Series, and PC. Afterwards, Nintendo confirmed April 18th for them. I haven't seen confirmation from PlayStation, but it's more than likely going to be the same there. What is interesting though is, it's not as soon. It's not soon because it's still a couple of months away. But it's sort of what we expected based on the promise from last year during the Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase 2022, or the not E3 showcase. They said, hey, we have, a promise to you. We're going to have all these games release by the end of, 12 months from now. So it's going to be sort of like, the first week of June is when they were going to do it. It is interesting that they've done it that way. They may change their minds. They may say, that was what we were aiming for. But so this one stuck the landing on the release date, which is great to see. One game that didn't stick the release date landing, at least not yet, is Forza Motorsport, and we got a whole bunch of new details for that. So Forza Motorsport is technically Forza Motorsport 8, but they're dropping the 8 and rebooting the franchise. Now, if you're someone who plays the Horizon series, so you've played through, Mexico and England and Australia in, 5, 4, and 3, respectively, the Motorsport series is where Horizon spun off from. So this is the main series in the franchise. Horizon is the spin-off series. And then Forza Street is the spin-off again, but that's closed down, so we don't care about that. Motorsport's big goal is to bring people into the track. It's a simulation racing game. It is the Xbox version of Gran Turismo. It is not full-on sim like Assetto Corsa. That game is, really, really high in simulation. There's also another one. I can't think of what it is now. But there's another one that released recently on Xbox Series X, and that's another really high-end sim. But yeah, this is much like Gran Turismo. So during the spotlight, which is here, we learned new details about the game. So the developers have used multi-point data sets for the car's paint jobs. So you can have two cars side by side down the straight of let's say Laguna Seca, because that's more than likely going to be in here because it's in every racing game. You can start at the start line, drive for 200 meters and then stop. And depending on the how much dust is on one side of the track, how much dirt, how much debris is on one side of the track compared to the other, the actual cars will look different. So the light will hit the paint differently on the various aspects, because the paint has been damaged by the dust and the debris on the tracks. So if you're doing a 20-lap race, your car will be shiny and new at the start, but halfway through it might look a little less shiny because of all the things. Bumps and scrapes in that will take paint off. It'll look worse as the more you go and drive through. But it's not just that; it's the weather itself. So if it starts to rain, the dust might get washed off the car, and you've got a shinier paint job again because the water is sort of amplifying the reflections. And all this is being done in real time. This isn't like, yes, okay, if car is wet, apply this filter, right? It's all dynamic. So it depends on, how you're driving, where you're driving, what the weather's like. All that sort of stuff comes together to make a more cohesive racing experience. The other thing they talked about is the physics, the handling of all the cars. So if you've played Horizon 5, the Horizon series in general, that is an arcade racer. So that is more like your Need for Speed and your Burnouts, right? That is designed to be welcoming to everyone. The Motorsport series again, it's a simulation racer. So, you can't just drift around a corner, because cars don't just drift like that. If it's a dedicated drift car, it would, but a V8 supercar does not drift around a corner like a drift car does. So the physics in the Motorsport series are more in line with what the cars can actually do, whereas the Horizon physics are more like, you can tap the handbrake and do a drift at 160 k's an hour, right, for 4 seconds, right? Not an issue. With the physics in this game, they confirmed that the physics profile that they've built for the game is more complicated than Forza Motorsport 5, 6, and 7 combined. So when you think about Motorsport 7, which was an early, not early, but it was an Xbox One title. It's been 6 years or 7 years since Motorsport 7 released. So if you think of how the handling was in that game, you have to take that handling profile and the profile from 6 and the profile from 7, profile from 5, sorry, and bring it all together, and that is what this game will offer. So it should handle incredibly well. And then the third thing they talked about was the sound. So the game supports Dolby Atmos if you have a system like that, or headphones that support it, and also Windows Sonic for PC players. Obviously, there's things like the PlayStation DualSense controller has the speaker, so it does some sound effects when you're playing Gran Turismo 7. They're doing it a little differently here. They're sort of amplifying sounds. So if you do hit the the red and white sort of boundaries on turns, the sound for that will be a little higher to let you know you've hit it. So you can reshape your line for the next time you come around to it, or any other corner. So you can actually learn, okay, if I hit this, it's going to be really loud. So maybe I don't want to hit that. I want to hear the engine, right? So that's very, very cool. But the thing that sort of got me interested is that when you start strapping on turbos and adding in different headers for your engine, modifying fan belt speeds, exhaust, and all that sort of stuff, cars always sound different. Now in Forza Motorsport they will. So what actions you take for your modifications to your car, if you do that, it will slowly start to provide more information, feedback to you through audio means. So the more you tweak the car, the different it will sound. So you could have two Ford race cars side by side, but if one's got a different exhaust, it's going to sound different. It's not just going to be the same sound and a visual thing. It'll be a visual and audio impact. They also announced one of the new courses for the game is Kiami from South Africa. The problem that I have with these racing games is, as I said, Laguna Seca is almost certainly going to be in here because it's in every racing game. It was in Gran Turismo 7, it was in Project Cars 3, it was in Project Cars 3 games have all had it. It's been in GT series for a while, it's been in the Motorsport series before. They don't just pick Joe's Motor Speedway from the middle of Wisconsin and Bert's Speedway from Lincolnshire in England, right? They pick the popular ones. If you go to a Motorhead and say, cool, give me the name of 3 speedways, they'll say Bathurst, and they'll start giving you the really, really big names. And they've confirmed there will be 20 tracks at launch for the game, and a lot of them are going to be those same things. Those same tracks that we've seen in past Forza games are going to be here again. They'll look shinier, they'll look newer, but they're going to be the same tracks. One of the tracks we know that's not one of those is Maple Speedway, and that is one that they've had in the series before. So I really love it when I get to race in the Forza games. When I race on these are completely original tracks that the studio's designed. I think they're more fun. But yeah, so we know there'll be 20 tracks at launch. We know there'll be 500 cars at launch. At the moment, Gran Turismo is sitting around 460 cars, and they keep adding cars every couple of weeks. They had 2 or 3 cars at a time. So they're coming up on a year since that game released, and they're not even at the same number of cars that Forza is. And obviously the sort of the big thing that surprised a lot of people is that the game will run at 4K 60 frames a second with ray tracing on. Unlike Horizon, where ray tracing is only in the showcase when you're checking out your car in the building. This is ray tracing enabled as you're racing around the tracks. So reflections, they have the way the lights hit, the way the lights illuminate the road when it's wet, all that sort of stuff will play out very differently with ray tracing on. Obviously, if you're playing on Series S, you won't get ray tracing because it doesn't have the tech in there for that. And then obviously if you're playing on PC, you need to have the appropriate hardware for all that sort of stuff. But yeah, as I said though, the thing they didn't do is they didn't give a release date. They gave 2023. Now the reason why that's an issue isn't because it's not dated. Maybe they were aiming for the end of April, but they just weren't sure, so they didn't want to date it just in case. But 2023 sort of indicates that it's not going to release in the first 6 months. It might release in September, which sort of breaks the promise of every game within 12 months. It could be that way. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm not holding out breath it's going to release before June. I think they're going to hold on to this one until they're happy that it's going to release. And as Tabs has brought up in the thing here with the track count, I fully expect there to be more tracks released post-launch. Simply because the developers, the way they said 20 tracks at launch indicates there will be tracks added. How frequently they are added is yet to be seen. I suspect we're probably going to be seeing, maybe 1 or 2 tracks every 2 or 3 months. We don't know any plans about their online, apart from they will have online. So we really just need to wait and see. Hopefully the Forza Motorsport game gets its own dedicated developer direct, like Starfield is going to have. But yeah, we have to wait and see on that one. As much information as they did give us, a lot of it was like, look how shiny our game looks, look how great, hear how great our game sounds. It wasn't anything super fancy in terms of specific information about, okay, what cars do we have, what tracks do we have. So yeah, interesting stuff, but we need some more detail. Obviously after that they pivoted away from Forza, and during the opening moments of the show they crossed out 4 games for the showcase and added in a 5th game, and the 5th game was from Tango, which they were in the sort of the opening montage before this was announced, so everyone was like cool, and then the name of this game leaked the day before because it was leaked via the Microsoft Store, but there was no information on it. It was just like the blank page listing for it. But with that there, they, Tango announced Hi-Fi Rush, and then they surprised everyone by releasing the game that day. So Hi-Fi Rush is the 4th console game from Tango Gameworks. It's their 5th game overall. They did a mobile game that was Japan exclusive for a while. So it was 10 months ago that we got Ghostwire Tokyo. During the press for that, Shinji Mikami, who's the founder of Tango Gameworks and the creator of the Resident Evil series, he said that John Johansson, who did the DLCs for the Evil Within 1 and 2, that he was leading a team working on a new game, and it just completely passed everyone by. But that was 11 months ago, 10 months ago, so it's been a bit of time. And then whatever the game was, nobody could have possibly predicted Hi-Fi Rush. As I said, it is available now. I'm playing through it for a review, so that'll come out soon. There's really not much to say about it. It is a rhythm action game, so it kind of takes the Devil May Cry combat system, but applies a rhythm element to it, like Metal Hellsinger does for shooters. It's very interesting. I don't want to go into too much detail because it is available to play now through Game Pass and to buy it. The main character is Chai. It's interesting. All the characters have food-based names. So the cat is called 808, but the person who built cat is called Peppermint. Somebody else you meet later on is called Macron, and then they have a robot called Cinnamon. So it's all very food related in terms of their names. The big bad boss is named Kale, for example, right? Because nobody likes kale. So yeah, it's very, very cool. It is so vibrant. It's essentially a living comic, but the characters sort of have that 80s Japanese anime sort of style to them. There are times when it's full on, CG, 3D rendered stuff, and then the times it looks like it's hand drawn animation. So there's a lot of stuff going on with it. That's the bad guys there. But yeah, it is a very, very fun game. It is a very fast game. The big thing obviously is that you need to fight to the beat. Every action you do is done to the beat. The more that you are in sync with the beat, the better your score gets, the better your attacks get. So yeah, there's a lot going on to it. There is a deep dive video that they released as part of the showcase where they talk about it in detail, which I highly recommend checking out if you are interested. There are some issues with the game. It's not as amazing as everyone keeps saying, socially. It is fantastic, but it's not. There are some issues with it, which I'll get to into the review. But yeah, I think it's cool. This is the first time I think Bethesda have done a console game, where they announced it and dropped it the same day. They did it with Fallout Shelter. Bethesda Game Studios did that for mobile back in 2014, I think it was. 2014, 2015, one of them. And I remember it because I was at the E3 showcase where they announced it and said, oh, it's coming out after the show. Xbox did it a year or two earlier. They did the Dead Rising 4 DLC where Capcom Vancouver, who were the developers at the time, it was called Ultra Turbo Alpha Remix, something like that. Made a joke about all the Street Fighter names. So yeah, it's been a long time since Xbox have done any sort of shadow drop. Obviously Nintendo do it quite frequently. We had, one every day for 5 days, or 2 every day for 5 days, where they did the Indie World event last year at the end of the year. We've seen it, PlayStation do it with indie games. And let's face it, indie games are pretty easy to do because they're generally smaller titles. But this game was developed. It's fully voiced. It went through all the Q&A. It had everything done, and nobody knew about it. This wasn't a game made by 3 guys in a garage. Their Q&A was done by the same 3 guys. This was a full development team at a major studio. It went through all the bits and pieces that these games have to go through to release, and nobody knew this game was coming. So that's what makes this really special. Is it's not just that they announced a brand new game and they didn't just drop a demo for it. Is that they announced a new game and they released it at once. So yeah, very, very, very cool that they've done that. Wait for the review, I suppose, to see my full thoughts. Moving away from bright and colourful, it's time to go into the world of dark and dreary, and that is because we are heading back into the world of Elder Scrolls Online. Specifically, they announced the name of it during the developer direct, but then they hosted the ESO, Elder Scrolls Online, global reveal right after the developer direct. So it's all sort of wrapped it into the one big story here. But the new DLC is called Necrom. And Necrom was some sort of connected to the Dragonborn DLC for Skyrim. And yeah, so every year in June, ZeniMax Online Studios, which are the developers for Elder Scrolls Online, they've dropped a major expansion, which adds 30 to 40 hours of story content. But they do dungeons and prequel sort of things leading up to it. But Necrom is the new one. That's the chapter. Sorry, that's the series name. It's called Necrom. The chapter in June is called Shadow over Morrowind, because this one isn't adding in a new realm. So we've had the western part of Skyrim. We've had Oblivion. We've had High Isle was last year. We've had Summervale. Someone will correct me on that one. There's been, every other expansion had a new landmass added to it. One of them was Morrowind. This one is set in Morrowind. It's a different part of Morrowind, but it's set in Morrowind. So the 2 regions that players will get to visit, one is the Telvanni Peninsula, which is, the main, world here. You can see it here. This is the City of the Dead in the Telvanni Peninsula. And the other one is Apocrypha. And Apocrypha is where the big baddie of of the expansion sort of lives. And again, they're within Morrowind. So previously in Vardenfall there was Sadrith Mora. That is, the giant mushrooms that everyone knows from Morrowind. That is one part of the map. This is another part. The capital city of the region is called Necrom, because it is the city of the dead. So, Necromancer, the Book of the Dead, stuff like that. So the Dark Elves, before there were factions within the Dark Elves, before the Three Banners War from Elder Scrolls Online kicked off, long before all of that, Necrom was the place to bring those who have died, so they could go through, the last rites, if you will, be treated with respect and sent on to the afterlife. So because this city and this practice existed long before all of that, before all the factions and everything, this is considered a safe zone. You can't undertake any sort of issues or combat within the area because it is so sacred. So that's there. There's a big thing with the architecture, with the giant sort of stone fingers reaching up from the ground into the sky. Apocrypha, as I said, though, is the other region. Apocrypha is where you'll find Hemerus Mora. He is a Daedric prince, which was revealed in the Dragonborn DLC from Skyrim. Obviously, recently there was the Oblivion DLC. In the Oblivion game, there was the expansion that had put Sheer Gorath in there. So we've interacted with a few of them in the various games now, but this is this guy. Hemerus Mora, his big thing is knowledge. So if you create a new recipe, he learns it. If you write a new tale, right, and you never show anyone, he has a copy of it in his book. So the world that he has, the world that he controls, it's full of books. So you can see here all the things stacked up in the sky, all the structures, they're all made of books. So with this, people will go into his realm because they want knowledge. The knowledge is, alluring, too much of a good thing and all that sort of stuff. There is a researcher who's sort of spending time within the realm because, Hemerus Mora is actually amused by this person who wants to research things. But those who, stay too long get converted into what's called the shush. Like in a library, you shush people. And they will start slowly, over time turning into these folks, and they basically become mindless things and they will attack you. There's a whole lot more to it. They did, as I said, the deep dive went for like half an hour, and they really dove into various aspects of it and showed off some of the enemies in the world, from the little guys that live in books, kind of like crabs in a shell on the beach, to sort of the more reptilian creature from the Black Lagoon looking guys who will try and drag you into the marshes and all that sort of stuff. The other thing they revealed is the 2 new companions for the update. So this is the 3rd year of companions. They put them in High Isle last year, and then it's honestly driving me insane that I can't think of what it was called. Somerset Isle. That sounds right. It's not, but it sounds right. So companions are AI-controlled characters that come with you if you want them to. You don't have to have a companion. You don't just instantly get a companion. You have to meet them, help them out with something, and then they'll say, hey, you help me, let me help you. It's very much like Dogmeat in Fallout 4. It's like Lydia in one of the I was going to say the thralls, the servants in Skyrim. They will come with you, they'll carry things, they'll help you out in combat, all that sort of stuff. But they're not, one-note characters where they'll gladly follow you. They will speak up if you're doing something they're not happy with. They'll join in conversations, do all that sort of stuff. Now, the new guys, there's 2. There is the Redguard Arcanist named Azander Al-Sabids. He is the guy holding the book with the weird squid staff behind him. He is an Arcanist, which is one of the new character classes being added to the game. We'll talk about that in a moment. So he's very book smart. but because he's book smart, he's not exactly street smart. So he has the knowledge, just doesn't really know how to use it. The other new companion is an Argonian warden named Sharp as Night. He is known to be very somber, very quiet. He will not just like chat randomly for no reason. But once you earn his trust, he'll start to open up to you. As I said too, the Redguard Arcanist is Xander, and he is one of the new character classes. So this will be the third character class I've added to the game since then. The Arcanist can use tomes to choose sort of like subclasses in there depending on what they want to do combat wise. Will they add in will they focus on defense, will they focus on power, things like that. Unfortunately, I don't dive into the Arcanist stuff because they did it in the video and they do it a lot better than I could have done it. But that's sort of there. If you haven't played it yet, as part of the developer direct, they did announce that all 20 content drops, so the 8 major expansions and all the subsequent smaller ones are now available for free for a limited time. So if you want to jump in and try out the Morrowind expansion or the Oblivion expansion or the Skyrim expansion, you can do that. The game itself is included in Game Pass on Xbox. It's on PC, Mac, and PlayStation. On PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, it's fully optimized for them. As an MMO, they cut rid of all the traditional, MMO grinding stuff, and they went to more of a, familiar Elder Scrolls leveling system. So it still has some MMO stuff, but there's no regions where you have to be a set level to explore it now, which is very, very cool. So the way that these things work is they generally will have the reveal in January, then in March they do like a dungeon or a small update which sort of helps set the story for what's coming in June. They drop the big expansion, then September, October is when they drop the second smaller update for the year, which so that's the opening, prelude, the main story, and then the epilogue essentially. And that's how they sort of have done this for all the years past. So this year in March there will be we'll see the release of the Scribes of Fate DLC, which will add 2 new dungeons, which again help set up the story to come in June. As always, they do PC and Mac first, and that's coming on March 13th. Then 2 weeks later, on the 28th, they'll drop the console versions. In June, on the 5th, we'll see the Necrom main expansion release. June 5 for PC and Mac, and then 2 weeks later on June 20th for the consoles. The reason they do that is just so when they release it on PC, if there are any issues, they can address them, try and fix them up. And then once they're happy and you get all those fixes done, they can add those to the console versions before they release. So that's sort of why they do that thing. Normally, in September will be the third sort of DLC for it. This year, they're not doing that. They're doing the Dungeon DLC, they're doing the main DLC, and then September will be a quality of life release. So every time they release new content, they add fixes and changes and all that sort of stuff, keep things balanced. But they're, 10% of the work. The September release, or the end of the year release, I should say, will be purely focused on that. It's not going to be about putting in, new content to explore, new characters to meet. None of that. It's going to be, fixing up maybe mechanics that haven't quite worked the way they intended, right? If there's sections of the world that are a little, tricky to explore, it's about, correcting that. Maybe reshaping the path so it's clearer to see. So it's all about making those sort of changes and fixes to the game to make it more for players, so they can enjoy it. Because if you think about it, there's been 8 major expansions so far, which again, 30 to 40 hours. So even if you're lowball, you're looking at 240 hours in expansions. If you're the highball, you're looking at 320 hours. If you talk about all the main content from the game, so just the main original release, that's another 50 to 60 hours. Then you've got side quest galore, dungeons that you can team up with 3 other players to do it. You can team up with 12 players in total. They added the card game last year, as part of the High Isle expansion. So they've added so much to it. So just in terms of sheer number of hours of content available to you, you're talking like 500 plus hours. So with all that, the fact that, you know, they're now saying, hey, we're not going to add more content at the end of the year. We're going to focus on fixing a bunch of things that, you know, the players have told us are not quite right, I think is phenomenal. I think it is a great way to do it. And again, it's not to say they haven't fixed things over the years. You know, World of Warcraft, they just released you know, an update during the week that added a new dungeon, but they fix things. So fixes get applied all the time, but this is basically them saying, hey, we're going to focus on all of this because we think we have, you know, a great, you know, sense of what we want to see here. So I think that's very, very cool that they're doing that. That was not the only Bethesda game. So that was 2 Bethesda games in you know, the Xbox and Bethesda Developer Direct. There were 2 Xbox-owned studio titles, and there are 3 Bethesda game studios. The third one was Redfall, which got a release date, which, you know, I kind of hinted at previously was expected to be around the beginning of May. But they also released a bunch of new details for it. No problem, Tabs. Thanks for stopping by. So yeah, with Redfall, they sort of dove into the gameplay more here, showing off the weapons, sort of how the zones of the world will work, and then how each of the zones, you know, they have a major boss, and if you kill enough major bosses in three zones, sort of the main boss of that region will come into play. They showed off the characters and their abilities. It is a 10-minute deep dive. Like, I highly suggest you give it a watch because they will explain everything far better than I can. The 2 things that sort of you have to take away from this. The first is that they jump back and forth between the characters. So, you know, you'll see the sniper guy and then, you know, the girl with the robot dog, right? Those are all very cool. The way that the game's set up is that if you pick the sniper guy as your character, that is your character. You don't get to swap and choose. You know, you're heading into a region where it's, you know, there's no real sniper purchase for that guy, so you don't get to pick somebody else. The character you pick at the start is the character you're with. The classes that you sort of earn and move towards as you play, those will help, you know, provide variety, but that's not, you know, you don't get to swap and change characters. So if you do play this, you know, with mates, because, you know, it's a 4-player co-op game as well, you know, if 2 people pick the sniper, you're both stuck with the sniper. So you have to really sort of balance that out. They don't really show that. They don't really say that so much in the gameplay because, again, they do show off all the characters. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing too is the gameplay is much slower than you're probably expecting. A lot of people keep saying it's, you know, Back 4 Blood, it's Left 4 Dead. It's more akin to Destiny than it is those games, right? It's kind of like elements of them mixed with a bit of, you know, Destiny with, you know, weapons and character classes and skills. And then, you know, sort of a dash of the Division sort of thrown in, right, with weapons. So they do dive into more of the, what's the best way to describe it? More of the, you know, unique weapons. They show off a little bit of them, like the stake gun and the bone gun, but they don't really dive into them the way, you know, people were hoping for. Again, we did see, you know, so there's the stake on the end of the gun. There are different versions of the stakes. So you can have a gun, have a stake at the end of the gun that, you know, does damage of one type as opposed to another, you know, so it impacts the vampires differently. I'm just going to call her Umbrella Girl. That's showing off her ability. The other thing too is, like, the gunplay. They didn't sort of show if you can look down the sights of the gun like you would in a traditional shooter. So it's sort of very interesting, you know, how they're sort of showing it all off. This is the vampire god of that region. Again, showing off the, you know, the co-op multiplayer here. There's another vampire upstairs. I'm not convinced on this game. I haven't been convinced on it since it was announced. Mostly because there's just something about the Arcane games recently that don't grab me. Which is interesting because they developed years ago a Might and Magic game. And I love that game. I think it's phenomenal. But lately it's just something about it just doesn't really grab me. And with this one, I'm like, okay, it's a shooter. I'm good with shooters. You know, it's an open world game with friends. I'm like, cool, that sounds great. But then they showed this gameplay, and again, it's really slow. Now, part of me hopes that's just because they needed it to be slower, so that people who maybe hadn't seen the game before weren't completely lost with everything they were showing off. But who knows? There's no way of knowing if that's the case because they haven't specified anything about it. They've just shown off what they've shown off. Given that the game is a little over 3 months away, with May 2nd as the release date, hopefully they do release some proper, 5-10 minute chunks of unedited gameplay so we can see if it is faster paced, if it does provide more options than just, running down streets. So I want to see that. I'm not convinced on it yet, but they have time. After the show was done, they confirmed, that Starfield will be getting its own developer direct. We don't know when. It's just coming. That game, again, it's supposed to be released before, so the 12th of June. The only sort of time, unless they drop it like in March, I would expect it to be a late April game. But I also wouldn't think Xbox would put Starfield, 2 weeks either side of Redfall because they want to make Redfall, its own thing for a bit. And then this is where things get really weird. So Redfall is May 2nd, Zelda is May 12. After Zelda, there's nothing for 2 and a bit weeks, and then in June we have Street Fighter 6, Final Fantasy 16, and what was the fifth? There's another one. Diablo 4. So in the space of, and Suicide Squad's in there as well at the end of May. So in the space of 6 weeks, you've got 7 weeks. You got Redfall, Zelda, Suicide Squad, Street Fighter, Final Fantasy, and Diablo. Right, so there's massive games, and I can't think of Xbox would say, hey, let's throw another 200-hour RPG in that mix. I just don't see it happening. It's possible they might, but I don't see it happening. So I suspect that game's going to slip until the end of the year. It wouldn't surprise me if they went for a November 11 release date again, just to reclaim it back. But we'll have to wait and see until they do their direct. They also have confirmed they will be doing another showcase, in summer in Los Angeles. The exact, thing that they've said is our teams are working hard and look forward to sharing even more of what's next for our fans when we return to Los Angeles for our yearly showcase this summer. Now that does not confirm that they will be attending E3. It doesn't say they're not attending E3. It just says that they will be doing a showcase in Los Angeles in summer. Summer for the US is like the 7th of June to the 15th of September. So it could be at any point in that time. It's more than likely going to be on the Sunday in Los Angeles, the Monday morning here in Australia, as they have been doing for a number of years in the Microsoft Theatre, which is next door to the Convention Center, which is where E3 is hosted. That is 100% more than likely going to be the case just because it makes sense for them to do so. Will they do more than that? We have to wait and see. We're still way too early for anyone to announce any E3 plans. We might start getting confirmation next month, maybe towards the end of February, about what studios, what developers may be at E3. But it'll be more like, hey, 2K is going to be at E3, and that'll be it, right? Not saying they have confirmed anything for E3, but they've been, there in years past. We have to wait and see what's going to happen with them. That may be, all we have to sort of worry about for them. With that done, because that was a lot, we are now at our what's coming out in the next sort of 7 days to play. So a weekly forecast. I don't know why I said it that way. It was weird. It is going to be a very packed 7 days. Again, no games released over the weekend, so we're starting this as of the 30th, which is the Monday. That is when we'll see Trek to Yomi release for Switch. Again, that is available on all the other platforms already, but Switch is finally getting it. The 31st, the day after, we'll see Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition release for Xbox platforms and cloud. Again, it's already on PC. Power Wash Simulator will release for the PlayStation platform on those days, so PS4 and PS5. The game is still coming to Switch, there's just no date for it yet there. The 31st will also see the release of SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake, and that is a PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch game. It will work on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, but it's not designed for it. The next day, which is February 1st, this week spans 2 months, we'll see the release of Football Manager 2023 on PlayStation 5. That game released last year on Xbox, PC, Switch, and mobile under its different names for all the platforms. The PS5 version was meant to release then as well, but during final checks they found an issue that they couldn't address in time, so they delayed the game. So it's now getting a release then. We'll also see the release of Rhythm Sprout, which is a rhythm-based action game releasing the same day. On the 2nd, which is a big day, we will see the release of Chef Life, a restaurant simulator for all platforms from Nacon, developed by Cyanide. They do the Blood Bowl series. That's another one of those, in a restaurant, I have to manage everything games. Deliver Us Mars will release on the 2nd as well. That is, PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. That is the sequel to Deliver Us the Moon, which released a number of years ago. Fashion Police Squad is releasing for all console platforms on that day. It is already available on PC. It's coming to all consoles on that day. That is a first-person shooter where you don't shoot enemies to kill them, you shoot people to dress them better. That's what it is. The 2nd will also see the release of Life is Strange 2 for Switch. That was announced just the other day. So that means all the Life is Strange games will be on Switch, which means you can now play them all portably. The 3rd, which is the Friday next week, will see the release of Helvetii for PC, Switch, and PS4. That is a Metroidvania-ish sort of hand-drawn animation game. And then on the 3rd, we'll see the release of Joe, Wanda, and the Enigmatic Adventures for PC and PlayStation platforms. That is a very cute-looking, like chibi Indiana Jones, 3D platformer. With that said, that does bring us to the end of another show. Again, this is a very big one because there was a direct in the middle of the week. It wasn't a Nintendo Direct; it was the Xbox Direct. I do think Xbox need to change the name. I don't think it's right to keep the Direct name. Sony stole the format from Nintendo, but they call it their own thing. The State of Play. I think Xbox need to do something differently with the name. For years we had the XO series, XO 12 in London and XO 19 in Brazil, things like that. I think those things, they should bring that brand back and really lean into it, but that's for them to decide. We will be back on Tuesday for hopefully the final stream of our Splinter Cell series Game 1. We are at the very end of the second last mission, so we should be able to knock that game out. Then we'll be back next Friday for another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show, going over whatever the news of the week happens to be. With that all said and done, enjoy whatever you happen to be playing next, and until we see you online again, happy gaming.